President, we have a national emergency.
This is one of the things that we can shoot first and ask questions later. Normally you can't do that.
All of a sudden these trees started moving out of the way. They parted for me. And then I came out into this opening, and there where I saw Jesus Christ.
Back in 1927, an American socialist, Norman Thomas, 6 times candidate for president on the Socialist Party ticket, said the American people would never vote for socialism. But he said under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program. He is more imminent.
James Madison, in 1788, speaking to the Virginia Convention, said, "Since the general civilization of mankind, I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachment of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations."
When men were free.
Broadcasting live from a secret location buried deep below the earth, you're about to make a connection to the signs of the times. W. Dean Shook is live on the air right now.
Welcome in, my friends, to End Time News. I'm your host, W. Dean Shook. Let me thank everyone for being here. And you realize that End Time News, we're talking about, are we in the end times? Are we in the last days of life as we know it? Look, we have to realize that in the Middle East, things are fired up. Things are getting worse. We're on a downhill slope that has to hit a bottom. You know, with all of the countries having nuclear capabilities, everybody fighting with everyone else, from China to Russia, all throughout the Middle East, being taken over by Islam. Now, this has happened in the past. There's been caliphates in the past. What's different about the time now? What's different about the groanings that are in the earth? And what's the difference about the groaning, the confusion of people around the world? Our financial system is upside down. We are on the verge of something big happening. Now, what that is and the way this is going to go, I don't know. But I do know this. Things are not going to calm down to the point where everyone is holding hands and singing Kumbaya. We're at a time in the world that's unprecedented from any time in the past. And I say that because there are end-time prophecies in our Bible that are one-time events that have already happened. The return of Israel. In the book of Daniel, the increase in knowledge. And there's a list. I'm not going to go through the whole list now, but there's a list of things that it says are one-time events. These are one-time events. These are not things that can happen again. When you put these together with all of the rest of the end-time prophecies that are coming to pass, you have to look at things the way they are. This is going somewhere. So as I bring you these programs, I'm not only bringing you what's eventually looks like the fall of America, but the fall of the world, the pestilence. Look at all of these things, the mutated viruses. Things keep getting worse and worse and worse. The powers that be become more and more and more corrupt. The thirst to control the world seems to be universal. Everybody wants to control the world, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get that control. The one world government. Our financial system is ready to crash, not just in America, but around the world. And it's from corruption and greed and the servicing of self. Well, I'm going to bring you the news that the mainstream media is not going to tell you, and I'm going to bring it in light of what I just said. So keep that in mind as we go through these things. During the first part of the program, I'm going to go through some regular news things. But in the second half of the program, I've been kind of inspired to go through what moderate Islam is. We keep hearing from our government and from all of the politically correct people that we're fighting fanaticism, not Islam. Well, you know what? In the second half of this program, I'm going to prove they're wrong, because Islam is radical. Anybody that follows Islam believes that they are above the law of any other country, and I'm going to prove that. Second half of the program, stay tuned for that. But first, some of the ridiculous news of the day. From the New York Post, birth certificates ask parents if the woman giving birth is female. The city health department, from the new parents requesting birth certificates, asks the woman giving birth if she's male or female. Now, is that not the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard? Along with routine questions. Mother's maiden name, mother's legal name, mother's social security number. Is gender a question you have to ask? And just in case it's not clear, the birth certificate request provides a convenient checkbox, and it asks the question in capital letters, what is your date of birth, your age, and your sex? The form asks the question in a section that's marked mother, parent, or woman giving birth. Now, according to Susan Summer, she says, to be clear, it's possible for a person who's giving birth to a child to identify as male. She's a lawyer from Labada Legal. This is an advocacy group for lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, and transgender people. She said that given various transgender stages, there's room for the person who gives birth to check the male box. Not to leave the father out, the form asks dads the same questions and gives them the same checkbox option. Are you male or female? Really? Really? Telling you the lunacy doesn't stop. How ridiculous is that? Well, according to CNN, the Justice Department could sue Ferguson for racial discrimination. Now, do you remember when I reported that Homeland Security was going to hold back funds if they didn't get a bill on executive amnesty that funded it clearly? And said if they didn't get that, they were going to hold back on funding for federal funds for our Homeland Security, putting the nation at risk, strong-arming the American people until they got amnesty, which obviously is illegal. And they were strong-arming us to get it. Well, here's the same thing. The Justice Department is preparing to bring a lawsuit against the Ferguson, Missouri Police Department over a pattern of racially discriminatory tactics used by officers. If the police department does not agree to make changes on its own, sources tell CNN, Attorney General Eric Holder said this week he expects to announce the results of the department investigation of the shooting death of Michael Brown and a broader probe, because they went beyond that, of the Ferguson Police Department before he leaves office in a few weeks. The Justice Department is expected to announce it won't charge Wilson for the shooting, but it's also expected to outline findings that allege a pattern of discriminatory tactics used by the Ferguson police. They say if they don't agree to the review and revise those tactics, the Justice Department would sue to force changes in the department. Now, when asked to comment, Ferguson Police Chief Thomas Jackson told CNN's Sarah Sidner, "I've received nothing new. Everything they suggested in the past has been reasonable, and we've tried to comply." Among the issues expected to be part of the Justice Department lawsuits are allegations made in a recent lawsuit filed by a group of low-income people who claimed officers in Ferguson and nearby Jennings targeted minorities with minor traffic infractions and then jailed them if they couldn't pay the fines. Oh no, take that for what it says. According to WND, you either comply to the way the government tells you to live or else, because a judge has authorized the personal ruin for a Christian florist. Now get this. A judge in Washington state on Wednesday authorized the personal ruin of a florist whose Christian faith prevented her from promoting same-sex weddings and was sued by both the state and a homosexual group. The Alliance Defending Freedom confirmed that Benton County Superior Court Judge Alex Ekstrom granted a summary judgment in the case against Baronel Stutzman, meaning the case will not proceed to trial. A trial had been scheduled for March 23rd. It was Ekstrom who said last month that Stutzman personally was liable for the claims against her, placing the business assets, her home, and personal savings at risk. The judge ordered that the state and the homosexual plaintiffs, each of whom filed a lawsuit, could collect damages and attorney fees from Stutzman. The message of these rulings is unmistakable. The government will bring about your personal and professional ruin if you don't help celebrate same-sex marriage. This according to ADF senior counsel Christine Wagner. The two men had no problem getting their flowers they wanted, she said. They received several offers for free flowers. The marketplace gives them plenty of options. Laws that are supposed to prohibit discrimination might sound good, but the government has begun to use these laws to hurt people, to force them to conform and to silence and punish them if they don't violate their religious beliefs on marriage. Stutzman said America would be a better place if citizens respected each other's differences and the government still protected the freedom to have those differences. Instead, the government's coming after me and everything I have just because I won't live my life the way the state says I should. I just want the freedom to live and work faithfully and according to what God says about marriage without fear of punishment. Others have the freedom to say or not say what they want about marriage, and that's all I'm asking as well. And I don't think that that's unreasonable. And I'd like to go on. According to the New York Post, Benjamin Netanyahu was asked why he's speaking to Congress. He says, "Why am I going to Washington? Because as Prime Minister of Israel, it's my obligation to do everything in my power to prevent the conclusion of a bad deal that would threaten the survival of the state of Israel." He said the current proposal to Iran would endanger Israel. It would enable Iran to build its first nuclear device with an unacceptably short time. It would allow Iran to build an industrial capability to enrich uranium that could provide the fuel for many more bombs in the coming years. A regime that openly calls for Israel's destruction would thus have finally the means to realize its genocidal aims. Now, mind you, I'm not opposed to any deal with Iran, he said. I'm opposed to a bad deal with Iran, and I believe this is a very bad deal. I'm certainly not opposed to negotiations. On the contrary, he said, no country has a greater stake in the peaceful resolution of the Iranian nuclear question than does Israel. But the current proposal won't solve the problem. It'll perpetuate and aggravate the problem. It would provide a path for Iran to become a nuclear power. And so it's very important that I speak about this in Washington. Why am I going to Congress? Because Israel has been offered the chance to make its case on this critical issue before the world's most important parliament. Because a speech before Congress allows Israel to present its position to the elected representatives and the people of the United States on a worldwide stage. Because Congress has played a critical role in applying pressure to the Iranian regime, the very pressure that brought the Ayatollahs to the negotiating table in the first place, and because Congress may well have a say on a final deal. I think the real question is, he said, how could any reasonable Israeli prime minister refuse to speak to Congress on a matter so important to Israel's survival? How could anyone refuse an invitation to speak on a matter that would affect our very existence when such an invitation is offered? And I would agree with that. I'm going to take a short break here. And when I come back, we're going to talk about moderate Islam. Does moderate Islam even exist? Well, you know what? We're going to go through this and take a look. Right after this short break, you're listening to End Time News.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. We either stand up to supporters of terrorism, or we and our allies risk losing the freedom we cherish. We must not let the jihadist government of Iran get a nuclear bomb. President Obama has had opportunity to stop them, but he's failing. Join with us and let's secure America now.
You know, seems these days that not a single one of us steps on a train, boards an airplane, attends a concert or a sporting event and doesn't have at least a fleeting concern that terror could strike. The reality of the post 9/11 world is that we're at war and we are a target. We all live with some level of uncertainty and fear. It's easy to lose sight of an issue that defines our generation, the need to stop terrorism in our time. Our president apologizes for America, and he's made it clear that the era of American exceptionalism is over. He campaigned on closing Guantanamo and trying terrorists in civilian court. On his second day in office, he stopped enhanced interrogation and he closed down the black sites. You know, where we got the intel that ultimately led us to bin Laden. He has all but abandoned Israel despite the fact that Iran is the world's leading sponsor of terror that openly calls for the annihilation of Israel. All while Iran develops a nuclear bomb that they recently announced could be delivered to U.S. targets via missiles developed during Obama's presidency, while he does nothing but talk. The question for every American is simply, are we safer? AreWeSafer.com provides you with the facts and the potential consequences of these failed policies so that you can make informed decisions. I mean, let's face it. If things don't change, everything will change. And we all hope that day never comes.
There is a sense in the world. There's a sense among believers. There's a sense among unbelievers. There's a sense among all peoples that things are unhinged. The Middle East is unhinged with uprisings, revolutions, and where's this heading?
How are followers of Jesus to relate to all of these things? How do they relate to biblical prophecy?
America is in spiritual, moral crisis. Values are changing, and so rapidly, that have not happened in the history of man.
How are level-headed, responsible Christians to relate to the testimony of the biblical prophets and the unfolding of chaos throughout the world?
Not just believers are wondering, is this a sign of the end?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. We either stand up to supporters of terrorism, or we and our allies risk losing the freedom we cherish. We must not let the jihadist government of Iran get a nuclear bomb. President Obama has had opportunity to stop them, but he's failing. Join with us, and let's secure America now.
Hi folks, have you noticed the federal government and police departments are using drones for everything? Drones are expensive. They're hard to fly. It can take up to a week just to learn to make a drone hover. Not anymore. There's a new generation of drones that are not only affordable but very easy to fly. Now you can have your own personal drone, anything from a micro mini that'll fit in the palm of your hand, right up to a full-scale model, 10 inches in diameter like the model I have, the V949 Pro. Comes with a 6-axis 4-rotor blade and an HD 2.4 camera mounted on the bottom. These drones are made of a space-age polymer. They're durable, and don't worry about crashing your drone. Replacement blades for this drone from the website are only $1.80 for a pack of 4. That's right, I said $1.80 for a pack of 4 replacement blades. You can also get an extra long life battery. This battery allows you up to a half-hour of fly time with a maximum speed of 40 miles an hour. Have your own personal drone, and you can get all of this for under $70. If you go to the website, wdeanshook.com, and click on the banner on the webpage, you can get from 7 to 22% off your personal drone. It's shipped as a kit. You can be up and flying your own personal drone with an HD camera within a half hour. Come to the webpage, wdeanshook.com. Click on that banner and get your discount today. wdeanshook.com.
As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. For then there will be great distress, unequal from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equal again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. When you see all these things, you will know that it is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. They knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come.
All right, thank you for that break. We're going to have a frank discussion here. I appreciate your coming back after that short break. We're going to start with a story from Breitbart News where cCaul meets with Islamic leader who says U.S. Muslims are above the law. Well, is that radical? As President Obama comes under intense scrutiny for his meeting with the Muslim Brotherhood officials, it turns out a top Republican in Congress has a similar interaction with Muslim leaders who have made questionable statements. Homeland Security Committee Representative Michael McCaul, a Republican from Texas, was photographed with and wrote a personal note in silver Sharpie to an Islamic leader who said practicing Muslims in the United States are above the law of the land. In 2013, Carroll was videotaped at the Muslim Capital Day in Austin, saying that Muslims are above the law of the land. Following the law of the land is part of Sharia, Carroll says in the video, according to a 2015 article in the Texas Tribune. We follow the law of the land. In fact, Muslims, if we're practicing Muslims, we are above the law of the land. The law doesn't affect us at all. When asked about McCaul's handwritten note to Carroll about moderate Muslims and his photograph with Carroll from the open house, Homeland Security Committee spokesman Lauren Claffey said McCaul was not calling Carroll or CARE, C-A-R, moderate. CARE has also been officially designated as a terror organization by the government of the United Arab Emirates, a decision that the U.S. State Department has not supported. The United States government does not consider these organizations to be terrorist organizations. State Department spokesman said in late 2014, after the United Arab Emirates' designation of CARE and others, U.S. Muslim groups as terrorist groups. So this has raised a very important question. Do moderate Muslims really believe that they're above the law of the countries that they're in? I did some research. Here's what I found. I'm going to start this with a clip from a meeting in a mosque who has invited some speakers. Now, what this speaker that you're about to hear is asking, he's asking the group, which is a rather large group, if Sharia is radical. Does it make you a fundamentalist radical if you believe in standard Sharia law? Listen to this clip. I'll be right back.
Can we have the camera? Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience here? Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience? Because every now and then, every time we have a conference, every time we invite a speaker, they always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that. He is homophobic. They subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same old stuff coming all the time. And we always try to tell them, I always try to tell them that, look, it's not that speaker that we're inviting who has these extreme radical views, as you say. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things. Just because they're not telling you about it, or just because they're not out there in the media, doesn't mean they don't believe in them. So I will ask you, everyone in the room, how many of you are normal Muslims? You're not extremists, you're not radical, just normal Sunni Muslims. Please raise your hands. Everybody, mashallah, subhanallah. Okay, take down your hands again. How many of you agree that men and women should sit separate? Please raise your hands. Everyone agree. Everyone agree. Brothers and sisters. Subhanallah. So it's not just this radical shift then. Allahu Akbar. Next question. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind. And that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists? Subhanallah. So all of you are saying that you are common Muslims, you all go to the different masajids in Norway, or are you like a specific sect, like the Islam sect or anything like that? Are you like that? No. Are you like that? Please raise your hand if you're like this extreme Islam sect or anything like that. No one. Allahu Akbar. How many of you just go to these normal masajids in Norway, the normal Sunni mosques? Please raise your hands. Allahu Akbar. So what's the politicians gonna say now? What's the media gonna say now? That we're all extremists? We're all radicals? We need to deport all of us from this country? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Takbir! 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 May we have the next?
Well, as you heard there, is stoning or death or any of that, does that make you a radical? No, that's what all Muslims believe. Any practicing Muslim believes all of those. The Sharia is right and good and should be practiced everywhere. That's not an extremist view. That's a standard view for all Muslims. The fact is, there is no moderate Islam. All of Islam is, according to our standards, radical. So can Muslim citizens be loyal to a non-Muslim government? Well, here's their answer. Many Muslims are loyal to non-Muslim countries where they live, of course, but it's in spite of Islamic teachings. Unlike other faiths, Islam is not a religion but a political system as well. The state is intended to be inseparable from the religious rule. Islamic law, or Sharia, is complete and not designated to coexist or be subordinate to any other legal system. Muslims are not meant to be ruled by non-Muslims. The Quran is very clear that they're to resist unbelievers by any means until Islam establishes political supremacy. This doesn't mean that everyone must be forced to become Muslim, but rather that everyone must submit to Muslim rule. They go on to quote the Quran. Quran 5:3. This day I have perfected your religion for you. This verse is often interpreted to mean that any government outside of Sharia is unnecessary at best and corruptive at worst. Quran 1826 says, Allah maketh none to share in his government. This was probably intended as a slam against polytheists, the Christian belief in the Trinity. They think we worship three gods. But it's also been used on the basis of criticizing earthly governments. And yes, they believe that we worship three gods, that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are all three separate gods, not three different aspects of one God. Quran, 1964, says, "And we do not descend, but by the command of our Lord. To him belongs whatever is before us, whatever is behind us, and whatever is in between these, and your Lord is not forgetful." They believe everything belongs to them. Quran 4:141 says, "And never will Allah grant to the unbelievers a way, that is to triumph over the believers." Quran 63:8 says, "Might belongeth to Allah and his messenger and to the believers, but to the hypocrites know not." The hypocrites are defined as Muslim in name only, those who do not submit to the theocracy of Allah. Quran 5:49 says, "So judge between them by that which Allah hath revealed, and follow not their desires, but beware of them, lest they seduce thee from some part of that which Allah hath revealed unto thee." Allah's Quran takes priority over the desires of the people. A democratic nation is by nature one that is not governed by Islamic law, meaning that a Muslim citizen would be divided loyalty. And it's clear from this verse which side the Muslim must choose. Quran 3:28 says, "Let not the believers take for friends or helpers unbeliever rather than believers. If any do that, in nothing will there be help from Allah, except by way of precaution, that ye may guard yourselves from them. But Allah cautions you to remember himself, for the final goal is to Allah." Quran 4:123. "Not your desires, nor those of the people of the book," that's Christians and Jews, "can prevail. Whosoever works evil will be requited accordingly. Nor will he find, besides Allah, any protector or helper." That helper, of course, refers to what Jesus described when he told the disciples, "When I go, I will send you the helper." Quran says there is no helper. Quran 28:17, "O my Lord, for that thou hast bestowed thy grace on me, never shall I be a help to those who sin." It is difficult to reconcile this verse with the civic duty of a public office holder in a pluralistic society. Quran 4:59 says, "O you who believe, obey Allah, obey the messenger, and those in authority from among you." Oddly enough, this verse is sometimes used in an attempt to make the case for Muslims should respect a non-Muslim civil government, but a careful reading makes it clear that the rulers Muslims are to obey from among their own body of believers. This verse commands strict obedience to the leaders, even if he steals and flogs them, according to the hadith reported by Sahih Muslim. Now, can this refer to a non-Muslim leader, when other parts of the Quran call for violent jihad against persecution for non-believers? In Islam, loyalty is to Allah and his religion. It cannot be a kafir country. As a former mufti of the Grand Mosque in Mecca put it in recent fatwas, his homeland may not be Islamic, so how can he be loyal to his homeland? They're saying if you're not in an Islamic homeland, it's not your homeland, and you can't be loyal to him. Scholar Jamal Badwa insists that Muslim not melt into any pot except the Muslim Brotherhood pot, referring to America as being the great melting pot. A CARE executive director of the United States recently said, if you're a practicing Muslim, you're above the law of the land. The Calcutta Quran petition says of Muslim communities that even fresh converts tend to become highly orthodox people and follow the sayings of the Quran with a fanatical zeal, with the result that whichever country has their sizable number amongst its population can never have peace on its soil. Where Muslim minorities exist, there is an unusual social strain that's manifested by dissension. It demands disloyalty, as well as a cohesive group identified that resists self-reflection, thrives on the perception of victimization by the majority. So let's be clear on this. Islam teaches that nations are in one of two categories: Dar al-Harib, that's the house of war, or Dar al-Islam, that's Islamic rule. Any nation that's not a Muslim nation is therefore, by definition, at war with Islam, or at best, in contradiction to the preferred order. Muslims cannot be expected to maintain their loyalty to a nation that's at war with their religion. Now, President Obama always says that we are not at war with Islam. Well, Islam is at war with us. And let me go through this again. Islam teaches that nations are in one of two major categories. Dar al-Harab, that's the house of war, or Dar al-Islam, that's Muslim rule. Any nation that's not Muslim is therefore, by definition, at war with Islam. Now, to be fair, some Muslim scholars contend that there's a middle ground. It's called Dar al-Ahid. It's the land of covenant, or Dar al-Shahul, land of truce. This is where non-Muslim countries agree to allow Muslims to practice their faith and evangelize freely in exchange for peace. Scholars consider this a transitional period leading to the eventual triumph of Islam via conversion. The practical definition of Dar al-Ahad or Dar al-Shahid are somewhat dubious. Some feel, for example, that denying Muslims their own system of law in Sharia courts constitutes an interference with Islam. Others believe that these states of condition may apply in Muhammad's day. Still, others feel that a truce has a 10-year limit, and it can be broken any time by the Muslim party. Another difficulty with these middle ground options is that there's no central authority to declare which non-Muslim nations fall outside the category of Dar al-Harib. True Muslims are citizens of Ummah, that's this Islamic community, and not of any country. Even a government of Muslims is not necessarily a Muslim government. Islam requires Islamic law. Therefore, theocracy is the only pure form of government. In fact, this is what propels the vast majority of violence in the Muslim world, which victimizes Muslims themselves more than any other group. Now, although Muslim apologists sometimes claim that Islamic terrorists aren't Muslim by virtue of the fact that they kill other Muslims, the Quran advocates striving against both unbelievers and hypocrites, the latter of which are Muslims who profess Islam but don't support Islamic rule. Hypocrites include any government which does not uphold strict Sharia, as well as those that make alliances with non-Muslim countries. This is the real reason terrorists kill fellow Muslims, particularly local police and troops and officials who are in the service of these governments. One of the most influential Islamic scholars of the modern age says that Muslims have a duty to overthrow any non-Islamic government by violent means. And here's what he says. Islam is not merely a belief so that it's enough merely to preach it. Islam, which is a way of life, takes practical steps to organize a movement for freeing man. Other societies do not give Islam any opportunity to organize its fellows according to its own method, and hence, it's the duty of Islam to annihilate all such systems, and they are obstacles in the way of a universal freedom. Only in this manner can the way of life be wholly dedicated to Allah, so that neither any human authority nor the question of servitude remains. As in the case of all other systems which are based on man's servitude to man, cannot exist. And there are even more who put it even more bluntly, who say that the foremost duty of Islam in this world is to dispose unbelievers from the leadership of man, and take the leadership into its own hands and enforce the particular way of life which is a permanent feature. In a book promoted by the Islamic Circle of North America, Islamic scholar Saeed Abdul Muhammadid writes that Islam wishes to destroy all states and governments anywhere on the face of the earth which are opposed to the ideology and program of Islam, regardless of the country or the nation that rules it. Islam requires the earth, not just a portion, but the whole earth. Whether or not a Muslim believes in active rebellion against secular non-Muslim rule, It doesn't change the fact that Islam is defined by allegiance to Allah and his self-proclaimed messenger, Muhammad. Therefore, his loyalty is in contradiction to what Allah has already established and would be strictly forbidden. It should be noted, though, that Muslims as individuals vary widely in their understanding of an alliance to Islam. While ideological scrutiny may be appropriate for certain sensitive positions in the intelligence, military, or law enforcement communities, simply being a Muslim is not sufficient grounds for denying employment or to make assumptions about any such individuals. Just a little disclaimer there. But once again, the truth about Islam rears its head and it displays its fangs in defiance of America and American laws. Austin, Texas was one of a number of places that took part in a nationwide event called Muslim Capital Day. One of the keynote speakers at this event was Mustafa Carroll, executive director of the Dallas-Fort Worth branch of CARE. And he said at this conference, if we are practicing Muslims, we are above the law of the land. Sound familiar? It's right in line with the way our Muslim president conducts his affairs and seems to feel that he is above the law. Islam isn't in America to be equal to any other faith, but to become dominant. The Quran should be the highest authority in America, and Islam the only accepted religion on earth, is what Carroll said. At one time, any preaching that you don't have to follow American law would be called sedition, which is a punishable crime. However, for Muslims, it's just living their religion. Their leaders can make seditious statements, and nothing's done about it. They can tell their followers not to abide by American law and that Sharia law trumps American law, and nothing is done about it. Let a Christian say that homosexuality is a sin and that they're instantly accused of hate language and find themselves facing lawsuits. Christianity teaches love your enemies. Islam teaches kill your enemies. Christianity teaches turn the other cheek. Islam teaches lop off their heads. You know, there is a basic description for ISIS that fits all of Islam. All of Islam is radical by our standards. I have a top 10 list here. I'm going to play this top 10 list.
If you really want to understand the rape and slaughter being committed in the name of Allah by the Islamic State, you have to study the history of Muhammad and his companions, a history found in the Hadith and the Sirah literature. But you can get a pretty good outline of the Islamic State's message and tactics by reading the Quran, which Muslims believe to be the direct word of Allah. For those of you who don't have time to read the Quran, here's a top 10 list of the most essential verses for understanding ISIS. In the Bible, Jesus says that God loves everyone. In the Quran, not so much. Surah 3, verse 32. Say, obey Allah and the Apostle, but if they turn back, then surely Allah does not love the unbelievers. According to the Quran, Allah only loves obedient Muslims. I wonder why ISIS doesn't seem to have much love for non-Muslims. Believe it or not, Allah's complete lack of love for non-Muslims plays a role in how non-Muslims are to be treated. Surah 48, verse 29. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those who are with him are severe against unbelievers and merciful among themselves. Those who are with Muhammad, i.e. Muslims, are severe against whom? Against unbelievers. They're merciful to whom? Only to their fellow Muslims. But politicians and the media just can't figure out why ISIS is so severe against non-Muslims. There are lots of ways to be severe against unbelievers. Here's one, Surah 4, verse 24. Also forbidden are women already married, except those captives and slaves whom your right hands possess. This may be confusing without the historical context, which you can read in Sunan Abu Dawud 2150. When Muhammad won the Battle of Autas, Allah had already revealed that Muslims were free to rape their female captives. But at Autas, the Muslim army captured certain women along with their husbands, and some of the Muslims started wondering if raping these women counted as adultery, because they were married. That's when Allah revealed Surah 4, verse 24, which says that married women are indeed forbidden as sex partners unless they're your captives. If they're your captives, rape them all you want. Allah couldn't conceivably care less that they're married. Heard about any groups raping their female captives recently? What about people who try to stop the Islamic State from establishing Sharia? Surah 5, verse 33. The punishment of those who wage war against Allah and His Apostle and strive to make mischief in the land is only this, that they should be murdered or crucified, or their hands and their feet should be cut off on opposite sides, or they should be imprisoned. This shall be as a disgrace for them in this world, and in the hereafter they shall have a grievous chastisement. Notice that there are several penalties, including death, crucifixion, and dismemberment, for the vague crime of making mischief in the land. Since the crime is vague, Muslim groups like ISIS can pack all kinds of offenses into this verse. And yet the U.S. State Department just put out a video making fun of ISIS for crucifying their enemies. When Muhammad was completely outnumbered, he had to put up with idolaters. But once he had the most powerful army in Arabia, the message of Islam became convert or die. Surah 9 verse 5 contains Allah's final marching orders on dealing with idolaters. When the sacred months have passed, slay the idolaters wherever you find them, and take them captive, and besiege them, and prepare for them each ambush. But if they repent and establish worship and pay the poor due, then leave their way free. Lo, Allah is forgiving, merciful. So kill them unless they convert to Islam. Sound familiar? Since idolaters have to convert or die, you might be wondering why ISIS gives Christians a third option, the option of paying jizya, tribute money. Surah 9, verse 29. Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book. The people of the book are Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So the benefit of being a Jew or a Christian, according to Allah, is that you won't necessarily be slaughtered for refusing to convert. You have the option of paying tribute money to Muslims in acknowledgement of your inferiority. Is it just me, or is ISIS following the Quran to the letter? But ISIS doesn't just attack unbelievers. Muslims are also targeted. Why is that? Surah 9, verse 73. O Prophet, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites, and be unyielding to them, and their abode is hell, and evil is the destination. The Arabic for strive hard here is a form of the word jihad, so Muslims are commanded to wage jihad not only against unbelievers, but also against hypocrites, people who claim to be Muslims but aren't doing what Allah tells them to do. The penalty for hypocrisy can vary depending on the severity of the hypocrisy, but when Muslims deviate from core Islamic doctrine, they find themselves in the apostate category, and the penalty for apostasy is death. So when ISIS kills Muslims who aren't adhering to central Muslim doctrines, they're just doing what Allah commands. But what about all the peaceful, westernized Muslims who condemn killing in the name of Allah? Sadly, Islam isn't defined by westernized Muslims. It's defined by Allah, who says in Surah 9, verse 111, Surely Allah has bought of the believers their persons and their property for this, that they shall have the garden. They fight in Allah's way, so they slay and are slain. Allah defines believers as those who slay and get slain. They keep killing until they get killed. Doesn't sound much like our peaceful Muslim neighbors, but it sounds an awful lot like ISIS. Muslims are only allowed to seek peace when they aren't in a position to violently subjugate their enemies. Allah says in Surah 47, verse 35, Be not weary and faint-hearted, crying for peace, when you should be uppermost, for Allah is with you and will never put you in loss for your good deeds. When the Muslim community is strong enough to slay the idolaters and to subjugate the Jews and Christians and to fight the hypocrites, peace is not an option. If you seek peace when you should be uppermost, you won't have much ground to stand on when ISIS knocks on your door and tells you that you're a hypocrite. This final verse might seem out of place because it's not about rape or slaughter, but you can't really understand how the verses about rape and slaughter fit into Islam as a whole without understanding Surah 2, verse 106. Whatever communications we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or like it. Do you not know that Allah has power over all things? People in the West have been trying to condemn the Islamic State by quoting peaceful verses of the Quran. How can you guys call yourselves Muslims when the Quran says there's no compulsion in religion? But those peaceful verses were revealed before Allah commanded His followers to slay idolaters and to subjugate Jews and Christians and to fight hypocrites. So the most important verse you need to know if you want to understand the Islamic State is Surah 2, verse 106, which lays out the doctrine of abrogation. Earlier verses get abrogated or canceled by later verses, which means that versions of Islam that oppose the sort of violence being committed by the Islamic State are now obsolete.
I'm going to ask you to please consider what we've talked about here tonight. You can email me at contact@wdeanshook.com. You can come to the homepage, that's wdeanshook.com. Twitter is wdeanshook. Facebook is wdeanshook. By all means, feel free to contact me if you like, and some of you do, and I appreciate that. Even if you oppose what I say, by all means, send me an email, call me names. You do that anyway, so go ahead and do it. And in the meantime, when the dust settles and the smoke clears, I'll be back with more truth in the news the mainstream media is never going to touch to keep you connected to the signs of the times. Thank you very much.
You can get these full stories and more at wdeanshook.com. That's wdeanshook.com.